Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a terrific day ahead of you. To start with, something a little bit different, something which could propel your season to new heights, and that is my community, as it is now reopened and is available for you to join. But why would you consider joining this community? Well, firstly, we saw massive success last season, whether that be through top 5k finishes for managers, multiple top 10ks, multiple top 25ks, and some huge rank rises since joining, whether that be from newer FPL players or more experienced FPL players. Two success stories in particular were Gideon, who finishes the world number 11, and Mal, who finishes the world number 58. Truly incredible performances. Now, in the community, even if you were just in the group chat and didn't participate too much, just being around the brilliant minds that are in there, because we have some truly exceptional managers and people, as it says on the website, and just hearing their strategies, their ideas, and even just feeling their enthusiasm for the game will almost undoubtedly improve your FPL experience this time around. So to join, click either the link in the description or in the pinned comment, and I'd absolutely love to see you in there, and I look forward to doing so. Now, this is a video that I'm really looking forward to filming because it's not so common that we get to discuss the real macro side of FPL and focus on things like structures. But this is a time that we can do so, and I feel very strong about my view, and hopefully I can at least get you to think about this perspective if you have not done so already, or if you're not particularly in favor of it at the moment. And then afterwards, we'll be looking at a few players who are close to template, or at least very popular, and I'll essentially be trying to justify why I'm going without each and every one of them, with a look into Cody Gakpo as well, who's not really in that category. So firstly, what is this slide all about? Well, I have a very strong opinion that the optimal structure resides somewhere around what I'm going to express, and then I'm going to essentially explain why I think that. So for me, right now, as it says in the bottom line of the slide, the optimal structure resides somewhere around having Mo Salah, Cole Palmer, an expensive backline in the form of a goalkeeper and 4 good defenders, and then the rest of the team, particularly the midfielders and the forwards, being mid-priced assets, which is exactly what you've seen from my team throughout preseason, because I've barely had any changes from my first draft. Now, I will explain why, going point by point by point by point. Firstly, I think there are a number of good, cheap midfield and forward options, and when I say cheap, you can call it cheap to mid-price options. I'm talking that more so 6.5 to 7.5 type of range, right? And we'll come back to why all of these are important, and we'll link them all together. Secondly, from a realistic perspective, I think it's unlikely that the higher price options, but not the super expensive options, aside from Haaland, so Saka, Watkins, Bruno, Gyökeres, Wirtz, Marmoush, and to be honest, you can even put Erling in this category at the moment, obviously, without the pricing point. I don't think they're going to end up justifying their price tag relative to those cheaper options because of the gap in quality not being that big. The third thing, C, is that I think the premium defenders are underpriced. I think they've made a mistake by not giving anyone a 6.5 tag, even if, right, Seabit has been introduced. I think there definitely should be some leeway to going to the 6.5 price tag for those who play for a really good defense and have a lot of attacking threat. So, for example, Gabriel's box threat, Cucure's open play threat, right? I think having them at 6 is a little bit too cheap. And I think that DEFCON isn't as big of a deal at the start of the season, given how the fixtures have fallen for the players who are particularly good in that facet. And then the last thing is, I think there is a much smaller gap in terms of the expected points between the forwards, just generally speaking, and even between the different categories of price than there are in other spaces on the pitch. And I think when that all comes together, that essentially means that the optimal structure falls within an expensive goalkeeper-ish, I'm talking about Sells, an expensive backline, Salah, Palmer, and then the rest being fairly mid-priced. And I spoke about Salah and Palmer in my last video. I don't want to go into it too much here, but very simply, I think the 2 best mids at the moment, I think the 2 best players in the game for potential point scoring. I don't think it's that close, especially when you consider how captainable they are. So let's go into this in some more depth, and let's start with A and D and look at the forwards in particular. If I look at the 7.5 options, I've got João Pedro, Jean-Philippe Mateta, Dominic Solanke, Chris Wood, Johan Wissa, if he is to potentially move or maybe stay, right? But at some point, he probably becomes an option. And then below that, I have Evan Nilsson. I have Strand Larsen as well. So those are 7 guys who, between 6.5 to 7.5, almost 7.5, could be really, really, really good value for your money. I look at the likes of Gyökeres, I look at the likes of Watkins, and do I think that they're really going to outscore them by so much the better of that category, which we'll come into at another point? Do I really think he's going to outscore them by that much to justify the 1.5? Do I even think the floor's there whereby, like, at least there's that safety net that Watkins is going to go on par for certain, or Gyökeres is going to go on par for certain? No, I don't think so. So even if they do better, I don't think it'd be a lot better than maybe the second or third best 7.5. And if you get that right, you're only losing a minimal amount of points there. I think the difference in the defensive assets between, for example, the 4.5s and the 6s, because I really don't like any of the 4.5s as standouts at the moment, and the midfielders, whether you be going from like an Elliot Anderson all the way up to Ismail Assar or an Eberechi, right? I think there's so much more to be gained there than there is in the forward category, meaning that, yeah, fine, Haaland might score every single game, but João Pedro, Chris Wood, Dominic Solanke, my preferences, could do well enough where they score 1 in every 2 games. And then the difference in the other categories, I just think it's going to be bigger. And even from the perspective of the forward, only 4 points for the goal, no clean sheet points as well. So even if you do play for a better team, the ability to pull away is significantly harder against your other competitors. So that's that. Then, let's say you do take the money out of the forwards, right? Why is it that you can go and invest it in, for example, the defenders and profit more? Well, like I said earlier, I think that DEFCON at the start of the season isn't as big of a deal. So those 5-5 defenders like Tarkowski, Forest we're going to leave aside because I think they're really solid. Tarkowski, the Palace boys, given their fixtures at the start, it's hard to capitalize on that because they're probably not going to be able to pair their DEFCON with clean sheets. So the ceiling isn't really there. Whereas you look at someone like Marco Correa, right? Huge upside in the first 4, in my opinion. And he's only 6, right? So, for example, if you went for like Lacroix, because he's really good on CBIT, but he's probably not getting too many clean sheets to start with, but only 1 million more, you're accessing so much more upside. And I think the gap there will be bigger than the gap in the forwards. And to be honest with you, I think the 7.5 forwards are so good that I don't see there's any reason why João Pedro doesn't outscore Ollie Watkins, or Chris Wood doesn't put up good numbers, or Mateta. I think it'll take a little bit of time, just given Palace's opening 3, but hits the ground running eventually. And Solanke as well. I'm really bullish on Solanke doing well when he returns to full fitness, which probably shouldn't be too far, given he's in the squad against PSG, right? So again, I know I've reiterated that a few times, but I think it's important. Then if I look at the B category, right, what do I think about the options on screen? Yeah, I think Haaland could do well. I think he could score very often, but do I think the conditions are optimized for him to go and smack a brace against every single team like he did at the start of the last season where he was scoring hat-tricks for fun? No, I don't think the City side is anywhere near to the level that they were for Haaland specifically at the start of last season, or just in general. I remember watching them in pre-season. I thought, wow, amazing. I'm going to captain Haaland away at Chelsea. I'm going to captain Haaland in Game Week 2, in Game Week 3, in Game Week 4, and so on, right? But now it's not the same. Like, the conditions aren't as good for him for a number of reasons. And when we do a Haaland section, we can get into that. Saka's got a really tough run to start with. Gyökeres is a really tough run to start with. I don't even know if he's going to start Old Trafford. I think it would make more sense to start with Havertz. Watkins and Bruno will come on to later, and Wirtz as well, because I think they're in the category above these 3. I think they're more justifiable, but I still think they're too expensive to justify for me at the moment. And then Marmoush, my issue is the expected minutes. And again, for City, when I look at their team, I don't really love what I'm seeing at the moment. I think, honestly, if there was one attacking player who had conditions that were good for him, it would be him. But still, the expected minutes worry me as such. So essentially, to wrap up this slide, I think that, 1, the margin that you can gain in the forwards is significantly smaller. But when you go for the likes of Watkins or Haaland or Gyökeres, it's not worth the extra investment of the 1.5 to 2 million relative to the defenders, where I think there's more to be gained, and equally the midfielders. We've obviously given a lot of love to the defenders. Why is this structure also going to work, in my opinion, with the midfielders? Well, when you look at them, similar to the forward category, they have enough good cheap to mid-price options, which you could realistically expect a really, really, really good return from. The number one standout for me, and someone who just unlocks this side in such a magnificent, brilliant way. And I love owning him, even though he hasn't kicked a ball in the Premier League this season. Iliman and Jai. 6.5 for everything that I've discussed throughout the season is remarkable value. Like, brilliant, brilliant value. And I think he's going to come good. So there's no need for me to go and get, let's say, a Bruno or a Wirtz or a Watkins in place of him and make such a big sacrifice elsewhere, for example, in the defense, because again, I think the drop-off is going to be significantly bigger. And I think the forwards are going to do the job anyway at the 7.5 price tag. Another thing with them is, say you get it wrong early doors, as long as you're flexible and the rest of your structure is okay and you haven't messed up too much elsewhere, well, it's pretty easy to pivot from a 7.5 to a 7.5, as long as you're willing to go early, right? Say you go Chris Wood, right? Scores 3 goals in the opening 4, then he has Burnley and Sunderland. Okay, you can go there. Solanke ends up actually starting in game week 1, does really well, gets an assist at the Etihad at game week 2. You want him in? All right, just sell Mateta for him, right? Or maybe find 0.5 to go from, or 1 to go from Strand Larson to him. I don't like Strand Larson as much as the guys mentioned, but still, the point stands. And then, if you look at it, if you've invested the money in your defense, you have at least 2 to 3 good forwards. You've got Salah, Palmer, and Jai start every game. You only really need one other mid. And yeah, you know what? This 4th midfield spot, in terms of the cheapest of mid-price options, I think there's a big drop-off between Njai and then whoever comes next. There's still enough, right? Like whether it be Eze or Sarr. For me, not Kudus, but I know a lot of you like him, and so on and so on. At least one of them's going to hit. The route to them is not too difficult if you get it wrong in the first place. And there's just a decent chance you get it right if you pick a truly good asset with fundamentals. So that's my reasoning for why I don't prefer drafts with Haaland at all, because I just don't think he's going to outscore the other forwards as much to justify the gap in the price tag. Whereas I think Salah, especially with how captainable he is, will, or at least can, and it's very realistic. Whereas I don't think so for with Haaland. Like I said, Watkins, Bruno, Wirtz in particular, I'd stick in the category above. I think it's much closer, hence why we're going to get onto all of them later in this video. But still, I just think that the value that you, or the money you have to put in there, and what you're taking away from your squad elsewhere, those gaps are just too big, as I've said quite a few times. So that's my argument for this. And now let's move into the players and look at them in a little bit more depth. You may think that I've got a really negative view on Ollie Watkins following what I said on the last site, but that is absolutely not true. And of all the assets I'm very likely not to pick, he's probably the one that I'm looking at and I think could do the best. In isolation, I really like him. I think he's going to do well. I think he's going to score goals. I think he'll get a few assists, not as many as he did 2 seasons ago, and I think he'll rack up some bonus. And I think the fixtures are pretty decent to start with. So, of all the players that I'm omitting from my side, I think he's one of the hardest, at least, to do so, right? So, I honestly think that he's going to do well. But, like I said on the last slide, multiple times, when you look at João Pedro's quality and the fixtures, for 1.5 million more, do I think Watkins is definitely going to justify that? No, I don't. I don't think that'll be the case with Wood or Solanke or Mateta and Evan Nilsson. Now let's just assume you play 3-5-2, right? And 2 of these guys have to do well. Well, I think it's safe to assume that 2 of these guys would at least be able to keep the pace with Ollie Watkins, whereby for 1.5 million less at least, it's good enough, right? And I'm just assuming, by the way, already and giving that Ollie Watkins is going to outscore all of them. Well, as long as you get 1 out of the 5 right, which you probably should do, if we're being honest, you can always use 1 transfer to catch up in the other spot. And the likelihood that it's only one of them, including Strand Larson and Wissa who aren't there, that hit, and all the other 6 blank and fail consistently, is and Watkins does really well, I think all of that is extremely unlikely, right? So as long as you're willing to be a bit flexible, I think it's cool. Yeah, as a player, as an asset in isolation, like I've said, I like him. I think the Palace at home fixture in 3 and the Fulham at home fixture in 6 could be a little bit tough. I think if there's no Morgan Rogers for game week 1, especially if he plays Buendia in the 10 and against Newcastle's midfield, I think that could be a little bit more difficult. I'm not sure how much time he's going to get on the ball and how much he's going to get on the ball in general. But overall, I think he's solid. I think maybe you'll see a lot of 7-pointers, 8-pointers at the start of the season with a couple blanks in there. And yeah, you know what? If you get a haul, great. But I still think the other guys can do the same. And as such, I just can't justify the extra 1.5 at the moment when the upgrades in the defense are really there and when I think Salah and Palmer are just absolute locks. One thing I really should mention, and probably should have done so on the last slide as well, is my dislike for the really cheap midfielders. Hence why I think there needs to be a little bit of cash out of these type of mid to high price assets to facilitate a better midfielder whilst having that strong defense. For example, Elliot Anderson, I'm not a fan at all. I think, okay, yeah, fine, he's going to get DEFCON points, but how many times is he going to hit me 10 points in the season? And how likely is it that in any given game that happens? For me, realistically, to capture the 10-pointer, I'd have to hold him for a long period of time and then just have that game within there. But if you're trying to time it, especially like looking to sell him fairly soon, I think it's going to be so challenging. And I don't think Forest system is one at the moment, from what I've seen in the iterations that he's got and implemented this season, Nuno. Is one which is going to really result in Elliot Anderson picking up goals and assists, right? Rangers is someone I'm going to look into a little bit more, but he could be interesting. But at 5-5, I don't really see many options at all. At 6, you've got Ruta at the moment, and maybe a couple others. Whereas at 6-5, okay, we have Njai, we have Sar going up a little bit, then we have a few more. But like I said, I don't think there are many. I don't think there are pretty much any good ones at all. 5-5 or less, maybe Rangers. And then I think going above that, Iliman and Njai should probably be a lock, and then you can just spend the money on whichever other midfielder in that price tag you think will do well. And I think that's a harder selection. And I think going, for example, Watkins, Elliot Anderson seems very safe, but the upside to me, and that is the big thing with this strategy that I'm employing, I think the upside that I have is significantly bigger because whoever I pick as the other 6.5, I think has a massive gap over, let's say, Elliot Anderson, who's a template pick. You will see at the bottom of this slide some tactical notes and some notes about Bruno Fernandes as a player. But for Ollie Watkins, I didn't do that. And I thought I should tell you the reason for that is because unlike the first slide, I am not strongly opinionated on Villa's tactics, how they're going to set up, the player interactions, as I usually am on this channel. My opinions are very, very loose, I guess you could say. And I wouldn't want to plant seeds of false confidence or doubt in your mind when I really don't have too much of a strong opinion at all. I can see it going one way, I can see it going another. I don't have too much of a strong opinion, hence why that was omitted this time around. You can apply all the strategic talk to Ollie Watkins to Bruno Fernandes because 3-4-3, 3-5-2, very similar, same price tag, and so on and so on. I think Bruno's a little bit different to Watkins in the sense that I'd say he's got a better floor. Because he's obviously got the ability to get DEFCON. So at least when Watkins is going to blank, I mean, he's just going to blank, right? There's going to be no goals, no assists, and he's not getting points from anywhere else. Whereas Bruno, you know, he could blank and he could still get 4 points, maybe even 5 if they keep a clean sheet, right? Let's say that he blanks in game week 3 at home to Burnley, okay? And I told you got 1 assist and they won 3-1, and that's all that happened. You're going to be like, that's not great, but, you know, it's not the end of the world. At least he returned. Similarly, they could win 2-0 and he could just get DEFCON points and a clean sheet and it'd be the exact same now, right? So even when he doesn't perform attacking-wise, you've got that floor there. So in that sense, I think I like it maybe a little bit more. But with Bruno Fernandes, I think one thing you may almost fall into a trap with is that he could appear to be doing better than he actually is. Let's just say, for example, he goes 5, 7, 5, 10, 2, 2, 5, right? Well, that's pretty good. But at 9 million, when there's other players who could probably do that as well, who almost definitely will do that as well, right? Like I said, with the midfield options, there's probably between Semenyo and Gordon and Eze and Sar, and then you chuck in the forward options in there as well, who you could change, right, formation for, and then just shift the structure around a little bit. There's probably one of those, or 2 of those, or 3 of those maybe, right, given the volume of options at that price point, that are going to do better than that. And if he's not performing at a really high level, like I've said throughout this video, I think almost you're losing points and it's hidden, like you won't see it. But like, for example, your combination of Bruno and Eddie Anderson is getting actually outscored by Chris Wood and Eberechi Eze as an example. And maybe you won't notice that. Maybe you'll just see, oh, Bruno's on par with Eze. But in the forward category, you'll lose the points and you'll say, oh, I don't have the money. But you do if you sold Bruno, right? If that makes sense. So looking at him as a player, what am I expecting and how is he going to get points? Well, one, it's not a usual pivot that he plays in, right? It's enough in-game, a back 4, and he's advanced enough whereby I still think he can get attack and return. So from that sense, I think it's pretty decent. Looking at his goals, I don't think he's going to arrive in the box as much though, because again, he's still limited somewhat because he's playing in this pivot-like role. And I think for goals specifically, which is really what you want from that midfielder, so much upside to it, 5 points compared to forwards as well, you are looking at long-range shots. And if United are in flow, which they were last season, obviously completely different team, but I guess similar tactics, so maybe there's some similar issues whereby they can't break down these blocks, right? First game Arsenal, tough one to do. Second game Fulham, I think you'll see an even more reliance on shooting from range as opposed to Bruno getting into the box, which is probably not what you really want. Fixture in game week 3 is great. But let's just say, for example, the game against City. I think for United overall, that's a good game for them to score goals, especially in transition. But he's not probably going to be the one on the end of it, and he'll have more defensive responsibility in that game. So the routes to goals, I think, could be a little bit challenging. And then the relationships with Brian Mbeumo and Matthias Cunha, from what I've seen so far, I think they're actually quite different. I think the relationship with Mbeumo, with the game against Everton, looked like, for a first game, looked pretty good, right? Like, I think Mbeumo is a very selfless, very intelligent, very good footballer, right? Like, he will be able to combine with Bruno. Short, when he comes short, he will do the right things when he's wide, and then, of course, he'll run in behind as well, right? He gives Bruno a lot of options, and I think that relationship between those two will work very well. Two very good footballers, and I think they're on similar wavelengths mentally. Cunha, I think, really wants the ball. And at Wolves, you saw that all the time, dropping deep into that left half space, picking up, carrying. And from that, you would see some magnificent goals. At United, though, it's slightly different, and I don't think he can be as demanding of the ball as he is. I think he's going to have to get used to, honestly, having a little bit less of it, occupying different positions, maybe even slightly higher positions than he would in that Wolves side, just to be there at the right times and, you know, have a little bit less, but maybe have a little bit better. And I don't think I've seen the relationship between these two be established quite to that sense, because I don't think he's playing to the role and Bruno's strengths as well, because realistically, you want Bruno to provide for you, but I think he almost wants to provide for himself at the moment. So individually for him, that's probably a good thing. He'll probably get goals from it or assists for it. But for Bruno Fernandes, I don't think that this relationship has blossomed in a way such whereby he can get like consistent returns from Cunha. Sesko, very difficult to say. I don't know if he's going to start game week 1. I assume not. And I honestly haven't watched too much of him. And I'd like to see the translation into the league because he's also young and not like super refined as well, right? So that's that. Although I'm expecting him to be good. So for at least for the start, for like Arsenal at home, Fulham away, 3's good, but then obviously you've got some tough games after. I think you can avoid it when you take into account the price tag. This is the hardest topic in this video for me, and we've just had Bruno Fernandes and Ollie Watkins. I think it's really challenging because I think there are things which balance each other out, but at the same time, like they've just got a lot going for them. Even more so, I would say, than Watkins and Bruno, because Wirtz is 0.5 cheaper, and 0.5 may not seem like a big deal usually, but this time around, how many content creators drafts have you seen with 0.5 in the back? How many people have you even seen discuss it? I haven't seen a single person, not one person, and it just goes to show how efficiently we need to allocate the money this season. And then Gakpo, right, is a whole million cheaper than Wirtz, 1.5 cheaper than Bruno, and in the category I was speaking about, and they're probably playing for the best attack in the league. So why they even in this video in the first place, and why they're being spoken about like this? So I'll say to start with, I think they're good options. And if you like, just like if you went for Bruno or Watkins, I couldn't criticize it. I'd probably, if I had to, I criticize this one even less. But we'll start with the positive. If you have good expected minutes attributed to Cody Gakpo, he could be a really good option at 7.5. There's routes to goals, right? Because you have someone who, when he cuts in, can score from distance or score from inside the box, as he's done numerous times last season, and delivered some big hauls, right? He wants to go far side, he can do that, he can whip the ball, and he has the power to go there. He also has the power to go across the keeper. Just the angle, that particular angle, that set of angles, he's very proficient from. And like I said, good enough ball striking as well. That's good. The other thing is, I think this situation could be manufactured for him quite a bit. Ekitike pulling into that left side, onto that left side and combining with him and facilitating that type of situation. But as a supplier for that, similar to almost how Ekitike scored his goal in the Cup, or in the Community Shield, you could imagine Gakpo scoring from similar-ish type of range and area, maybe a little bit wider, as he did last season, but was the provider then. And then even Kirkes in the half space or on the overlap, right? So I think he'll get into what is a preferred zone enough to potentially make him, or potentially get in there enough to make him a really good option. He's also a good crosser of the ball. And I say on the side, it's not something you'd associate with him aesthetically. And I wanted to bring that up because you may look at him and he doesn't really look like the type to be a really good crosser of the ball or someone who does it, but he is, and that's a route to assist for yourself. One thing I would say with him and Ekitike is, given Ekitike pulls quite a lot, quite unselfish, his combinations are clearly a highlight of his game, even with his body structure. You'd probably want a runner for that. Like, you'd almost want like the left winger version of Salah to hit that space that Ekitike creates when a centre back has to follow him. And Gakpo's not really that, so he's probably not going to score goals from one of the best avenues to do so when you have Hugo Ekitike in your side. Another thing is Liverpool's version of roulette. It's probably going to be that spread of output or potential spread of output through that front four. I think it'll affect Salah less because I think he's the best player in that front four. He's just Mo, right? We don't need to go into this again. I would say he seems like the type of asset that is almost a little bit streaky, a little bit Luis Diaz in that nature. And therefore, low floor, high ceiling. When he's hot, but otherwise, you're going to see some blanks. It's also a lot of over-reliance, maybe. Okay, over-reliance probably isn't the right word, but you're stacking into Liverpool, right? You're putting a lot of your eggs in that basket. You're probably going to captain Salah quite a bit. So you'd essentially have like triple Liverpool attack if you assume to have 12 players. So I'd say there's arguments for and against. It's which ones you really favor. Again, I don't have a conclusion that I like to give you at the moment. I think if you went there, it's cool. For me personally, I just think it's a little bit too much to trust Liverpool with at the moment, even though they're the best attack in the league, just because there's 4 of them. If there were 3 of them, right, and it was just Gakpo, Ekitike, Salah, then yeah, I would happily have 2. But when the spread of output is there between 4, I think you could, even if they have a really good game, just see him getting an assist or 2 as opposed to the goals that I want and being put in situations to score when, you know, that 4th player, who's a little bit worse, would be more of a provider. And then Wirtz, who we're going to come on to now, I think is a little bit more in the middle for both his floor and ceiling. And this is a very different type of analysis, as you will see. I didn't want to just say I'm not picking Florian Wirtz and just leave it at that, right? But this is a very different type of analysis. And if you don't agree, that's completely fair, right? It's a very subjective thing, as I allude to. When I see Wirtz, I see a magnificent player, right? And this isn't really about him as a player. This is about just him in the moment. But when I do watch him currently, I don't see this absolute ruthlessness that I would probably want at 8.5. I don't see someone who I'm super confident in when he's in front of goal is definitely going to score or put away those half chances or a little bit above that. I personally just don't see that at the moment. I also think he can maybe be a little bit more of a pre-assister, and then you've got the spread of output going on. And that's pretty much it. It's just a very personal point of view. That's just what I observe when I watch him. I don't have too much evidence to I guess, back it up. I guess if I went through a game and you were watching with me, I could maybe say, oh, look at his body language here, or look at this here, or this feels like this here. But overall, that is my opinion. If you disagree, that's completely fair, because he is a top player, and I'm aware that of how this could go. But I personally just think that it may just evade him, at least for the start. And to be fair, 2 and 3, Newcastle away could be a bit tough. Arsenal at home could certainly be tough as well. But the fixtures aren't exactly magnificent. Bournemouth at home in game week 1 could be nice. But again, that's the type where I think that it might just evade him, even though the conditions are there and he's got the quality. That's just my opinion on that. And that is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. For a better and more enjoyable FPL experience this time around, go and click the link in the description or the pinned comment and sign up to the community. Last year, we saw massive success. This year, I think we're going to see even more success. I think it will be a wonderful thing to be a part of. And if you haven't gone to check out the website, then consider doing so. The worst case happens that you look at it and you don't like it. And you know what? Maybe that's a good thing, because maybe it gives you more clarity, that you like another content creators community. That's what you're looking for a little bit more. You join, he's happy, you're happy, everyone's happy that you're there, and it's just a good thing all around. Or you click on the website, you realize this is a bit of you, it could be really good, and for what I hope is an affordable price, you then gain a lot of value and are really happy with the money you spend. Either way, I think it could be in your best interest. And that's about it. I very much enjoy the comments from the last video, just reading them, reading different opinions. This video is probably going to split opinion as well. So I look forward to hearing your arguments for and against. And yeah, please do comment them. I always read all the comments and I look forward to them. Naturally, it's just a very busy time, so I'll try and get back to as many as I can. But if I don't, and you've said something nice, please know that at least I really do appreciate it. I shall see you tomorrow, or maybe even today, depending on when you're watching it. And in the meantime, have a terrific day. Goodbye.